as well. Okay, and share and desktop one. Sure. All right. So we're gonna go over the reporting together first, and then we will go over some of the questions as I said earlier. So if you guys have anything specific that you'd like to cover, let's definitely go ahead and send it into the Q&A. So first of all, I'm just going to go over this section here. So first is the claim management page. It is going to be a bit different between the Canadian and the American realms, so that's something to keep in mind. In the American realms, all the claims that are on the system have to be sent at the end of the day or in batches at least. So what the system does is that actually sends them into the batch, into the unsent claims, and then at the end of the day, or some people like to do it every few hours, so it's really up to you. But as American accounts go, all the claims, electronic claims that you create throughout the day will go into the unsent claims. You'll see the claims that have any kind of validation errors will show up in red, and you'll have the show invalid info button in here. So you'll have the flexibility of actually seeing what's wrong and actually going into the patient by just simply clicking on their name and correcting the validation error. For the Canadian accounts, the claims automatically get sent through to CDAnet, so you don't have to actually submit them at the end of the day. They automatically get submitted. However, this tab here, the unsent claims, will collect all the claims with validation errors. So that way, if you want at the end of the day to check if there are any claims that were not submitted due to validation errors, then this is where you would come into to review. So again, US will have this as basically a batch claim sent for the entire day. So you would select the patients that you want to submit, and then at the bottom you would click send claims. Or if it is a Canadian account, then this list will be purely for the claims that have validation errors. The rejected tab and the history tab are both just historical. So you'll see the rejected claims in here. So you could tell how many basically claims have been rejected over time. So again, it's just for historical purposes, not really for any actions. And you can as well add notes. So this icon here, the note icon, is basically your note that will automatically add into the patient's billing page as well. And if you do have a note coming from the billing page as well, it will come and show in here. So that way, at least you don't have to worry about jumping to the patient's tab to actually add notes. So if you have a rejection and you've reached out multiple times to the insurance and still the insurance, for example, refuses to pay for a specific procedure, then you can always just add it in here and automatically drop into the patient's account notes as well. So it's basically, it allows you the flexibility of adding the notes from this page. The batch claims is going to be a list of all the claims on the system. Sorry, this is going to be a list of all the invoices on the system that have not been submitted to insurance. So you can include or exclude closed procedures, meaning that all the closed invoices on the system can be excluded. So that way it won't show you a list of all the invoices that have been already paid for and closed off. This is going to be common for cases where the patient has new insurance. So for example, if the patient came in, let's say in 2019, they had, I don't know, an insurance under Delta Dental, and after, let's say in 2020, they came back and now they have a new insurance under MetLife, for example. So that previous invoice has already been closed and already been paid for. So that way, if you don't uncheck the closed procedures, it will actually show you that invoice as a potential invoice to be submitted to that new insurance. And this actually has a setting from the admin side, so you can actually by default either include or exclude closed procedures, and we can go over that at a later point. But again, just keeping in mind that if you do see any invoices in here that has already been paid for previously, then make sure that this is unchecked on your batch claims. So as I said earlier, this is a list of all the patients that are on the system that have invoices with insurances that are not submitted to the carrier yet. So If you select which patients you would like to submit, you can click on batch claims and you can submit them electronically or manually, and that's for American accounts. Canadian accounts will have an option that says either submit basically based on what the insurance carrier supports, or you can create a manual claim either way. You can sort this claim by patient name, you can sort it by carrier, date of service, invoice date. So you can actually sort this list in whichever way that you see basically useful for you. And you can actually submit those invoices to the insurance basically straight from here. Outstanding claims are basically as a report of all the claims that have been submitted to the insurance and are still outstanding to be paid for, meaning that this is an insurance that has been submitted to, for example, Delta Dental, but it still did not pay for those procedures. And you do still have as well the note icon in here, the same one that is, again, available in the billing side. So if you want to add a note, for example, that you called the insurance and they said that they'll be, let's say, sending you a check in the next 10 days, you can always just click on this note and say called insurance, payment, for example, being processed. And once you save this, it will actually add it into this note icon here, and as well adds it into the billing page of the patient. So that way, if you go into the patient's billing page, you will see it as well attached to the same claim as if you basically added it manually on the billing page. So on the outstanding claims as well, you do have the option to sort, and you do have obviously the option to group by range, meaning that it will group your claims, your outstanding claims, by range of how long they've been outstanding for. So you have 0 to 30, obviously you have 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and then above 90 as well. And then you can either print all this report, or you can print a specific range. So if you want to only, let's say, call the insurances that have outstanding claims over 90 days, then you can just basically go down to that category and just hit that print button, which is actually in here, so you can print it in there. So this is for the claim management page. So again, it's under the gear icon. First tab is the claim management page. Insurance batch payments are going to be for you to be able to add payments into the system in one go for multiple patients. And that's very common for American accounts, much more common than actually Canadian accounts. So if you do get, let's say, a claim, an EOB, back from, let's say, Delta Dental or Cigna, and they sometimes send you like a list of 5 to 10 patients, for example, you can actually add a new payment. So you'd click on Add New Payment. You can search for the carrier. So for example, I'm going to go for MetLife. So you can include non-assignment policies, but by default, this is unselected, since non-assignment means that you're not going to be receiving a check from the insurance. So then you click Proceed. It's going to search for any outstanding claims on the system under MetLife. You can search for a specific patient. You can select which patients you got a payment for, and then you can click Proceed again. And this allows you to add a simple payment. So you can come in here, you can say it was a check, you can add a check number, you can add a branch number if you need to, and then you can actually add the values that you see on the actual electronic or the actual manual EOB that you received. So you can say insurance actually underpaid me and they paid only $75, for example, and the write-off was, for example, only $20. So you can actually update this on both, and then when you hit Proceed, it will actually apply a payment to whatever patients that are actually on this EOB. So that way you can actually just batch add a payment on the system, so you don't have to worry about having to enter the same, enter the payment on multiple patients. So you can do it up to 20, 30 patients, as many as you get. And you see that there is a button that says Upload EOB, so you can actually hit that Upload EOB and it will actually upload a copy of the EOB to every single one of the patients that actually got a payment applied to them. So that way you don't have to worry about going into each one of the patient's accounts and then dropping a copy of the EOB that you received. So this is really useful for offices that do receive batch checks from the insurance for outstanding claims. So again, we covered the claim management, insurance, batch payments. So now down to the reports. So the first report that you will open when you go into the reports section is going to be your deposit slip. So the deposit slip is going to show you all the money that basically you have received over the day. So you can default which payment types get automatically selected, and you can include deposits. So deposits meaning prepayments that the patient gave you. And if you do any refunds in the office, you usually then definitely include refund payments as well. So that way it will actually show you if you did any refunds during the day. So I'm going to run just a longer a report just so that we have a bit more information. So you can see here deposit slip on the right side. It shows you the total amount of money that has been deposited into the system. It divides it between patient payment and then and shows you insurance payment. And then under each one of the two, you have different payment types. So you can see how much you've collected in debit card payments, for example, versus MasterCard, account credits, and then you have cash as well. So any kind of payment types, and again, all of this is going to be custom per office, depending on what payment types you actually have set up in your system, then the breakdown is going to show based on what you have in your accounts. So again, this is really useful to reconciliate with your POS machines. So if you want to run the summary on the POS machine and run the deposit slip and just confirm that the two numbers match. And obviously, if you do want to go to the bank to deposit checks, cash, whatever you have in the office, then this would be a very good reference to how much money you're basically taking with you to the bank. So after the deposit, so if you go into the finance reports here, you have a whole list of of reports. First of all, I'm going to go into the aging report here. So the aging report obviously is going to show you the AR, or the outstanding report of all the patients on the system. So it will show you both the patient and the insurance outstanding, and that again depends on your estimates, if you are in network, out of network, if you are set as an assignment office or non-assignment, and this will obviously make a difference in how the AR will be displayed. However, again, keeping in mind that the system will only show your active patients. So if you ever want to see if you have any inactive patients that have any outstanding balances, then you can always run a report for only the inactive patients or just include all of them. You do have options to filter, so you can filter by minimum balance. So let's say you want to see only patients with an outstanding balance of at least, let's say $100. So you can actually filter either a total balance or an individual balance. You can sort or you can filter patients that have only individual owings, meaning that you are still expecting money from the patient and not from the insurance side. You can filter the report by patients based on the billing date. So when was the last time the patient received a statement? So you can actually bill since a specific date. And then obviously you can filter the report on one of those ranges. So you can see patients that owe over 30 days, 60, and 90 days. Then your sorting is going to be from high to low owing. Then carrier you can do, flag, last bill date as well. So you can see one was basically, you can sort them based on who was the last billed up to the oldest, and then obviously by patient name. You can do providers as well, so you can see how much is outstanding on a specific provider, which is great if you usually pay associates based on the production and collection. Then you can see how much is outstanding for every provider. So for example, if a patient has an outstanding under two different providers, when you filter by one of the providers, it obviously will show you only the value that contributes or is part of the outstanding to, let's say, Dr. For example, I don't know, Tom Jeff, and not like the entire outstanding of the patient. And then this is a really useful tool, which a lot of people tend to miss, the outstanding claims. So if you want to see only patients that don't have outstanding claims, so you can click patients without outstanding claims. So the list that will show up is basically everyone that has outstanding balances, but their claims have been already paid off, or they basically don't have any claims. Versus if you want to see aging report with only the outstanding claims, so you want to see who still has claims that are still pending to be submitted, still to be paid, then you can go for patient with outstanding claims. So not only is this just a report for you to be able to track your AR, but as well it will allow you to create batch statements. So at the end of the month, if you want to submit to the patient basically a batch batch statements to anything that is still remaining on their account due to be paid for, you can actually filter the list. So you can come in here and say, I want to filter the list by a minimum individual balance of, let's say, $200. And that way, the list that gets generated in here, it will allow you to actually just simply select it. And then you can click on Create Batch Statements. And it will ask you if you want to apply any additional filters. So if you want to do days since last statement, minimum balance here, family, individual, and share with patients will allow you to share electronically with the patient if they do have a MyChart account. So I'm going to just uncheck this for a second, click generate. And what will happen now is actually it will be running in the back to generate all these statements. So instead of you having to wait, so that allows you to go to run other reports, go do more work on the side. But then you can actually come back to this, and when you click on view statements, it will tell you whether or not it's been completed and if it's ready to be downloaded. So that way it basically allows you to do some things on the side, and then when it says completed here, you just click the download button, and it will actually allow you to download a PDF with all the statements back to back that you can then mail out if you do go for manual claims. So this would be for, again, sending statements. If you do have, a lot of patients, especially for offices that have been using Oryx for some time now, if you have a lot of patients that have MyChart accounts, then definitely you can utilize the share statements button here, share with patient, and will actually send electronic statement to their MyChart, and they will actually receive an email saying that your dental office has shared with you a statement. Please log in to see it. And if you are using OpenEdge, then the patient can actually pay online for any outstanding balances that they have. And any payments that get sent over from OpenEdge automatically get applied to the patient's account, so you don't have to worry about doing any extra steps on Oryx side. Anything the patient pays for gets applied automatically into basically your system. So moving on from the aging report, patient aging is similar to the aging report. It just purely is for the outstanding on the patient level. So you don't have to worry about the insurance outstanding. So it kind of creates a very simplified view for you if you really just want to look at patients' outstanding balances. The deposit slip, we talked about it just at the beginning. Now production and collection. So the production and collection report is going to be an in-depth report for all the finances. And it is basically going to be your end of day, end of week, month, year, whichever range that you decide to run this over. So what you can see here is going to be a list of all the patients with the procedures that have been rendered or collected payment on. You'll see the provider, so you'll see a rendering provider and a billing provider. So some offices have a default billing, so you can see I have Dr. A, for example, set as billing, and although the rendering provider was Dr. number 1, so you can have them different, or some offices would have the billing provider the same as the rendering, so that way you don't have to worry about basically like matching the providers. Then you have two columns. You have the production and then you have the collections column. So the production column is going to show you the procedure charges. So you can see how much the procedure is actually in value when it comes to the production of it. In the Canadian accounts, you'll see an extra column that is for the labs. So the lab charge would have an extra charge or an extra column that you can track separately. Then you have the adjustments, so any kind of adjustment that's been applied on the system. So courtesy write-offs, family and friends, professional courtesy, whatever you apply as an adjustment will change this value in here. The estimated write-off is very useful for offices that are in network. So if you are in network or you're contracted with the insurance carrier, it will show you what the system is estimating as a potential write-off. So that way, So that way you don't have to like overestimate how much the production of the office is. It will actually take in consideration what the insurance fees are and what's the contracted basically maximum. And it will actually show you the estimated net production at the bottom, taking into account the adjustments that you've applied and the estimated write-off. So that way when you're looking at your production of the day or the week, then you can actually tell how much you're actually, or expect a bit more accurately the collections because of that estimated write-off in there. In the collections column in here, you have the insurance payments, which is purely all the insurance payments that have been applied on the system. Same thing applies to the patient payments. You have actual write-offs. So these are the actual write-offs that have been applied, meaning that once you actually apply the insurance payment on the system and you apply a write-off adjustment from the insurance, then this will show you the actual write-off. So that way it would be a great tool to actually use for all the offices that are contracted with carriers to compare the estimated write-off with the actual write-off. So that way, ideally, those two numbers should be very close to each other. Because if you are running off of the correct fee guide or the contract fee guide that you have from the insurance, then the estimated write-off and the actual write-off should be very similar. If you do see a variation between those two numbers, then it's definitely worth taking a look at the insurance carriers that you have set up and making sure that you have the correct fee guides attached to the correct plans. The uncollected value is going to be specifically for your for all the adjustments that you've applied post payment. So if you're not expecting to collect that amount of money anymore and you're just going to uncollect it, then that's the column that will show up, because this is a value that you're not going to be again collecting. So it goes away from the collections column and not as a regular adjustment. Then you have the refunds. So if you did any refunds to any patient, then this is where it's going to show up. And then you have the credit balances, which will be basically any balances or prepayments or down payments the patient made, or if there's any overpayment due to an insurance extra. Let's say they paid more than what was estimated, it will go into the patient's credit, so it will show up in here as well. So that way you can track how much credit you have on the system. And this is really nice to keep as well an eye on, because when you have credits on the system, especially for bookkeepers, this means that this money is not technically yet part of the collection of the office until it's actually applied towards a rendered procedure. So it keeps your numbers more accurate, especially the collections. So that way when you're looking at how much you've collected over a specific range of time, you're never overestimating or over-calculating your collection value, but actually showing the correct value in collections instead of actually showing a more, I guess, I want to say confusing number for bookkeepers when they're looking at your numbers because of that extra credit that you have. That's, again, not technically yet a collection until it actually gets applied to the patient's procedures that were walked out. At the bottom, you have the summary of this. So you can see the net estimated production. You can see the number of patients seen on the day. You have the average production per patient, so how many patients you've basically seen and how much the production was. So that shows you on average basically the value of the patient during the day. Then you have the total collections. You have the actual write-offs, full amount, and then the total uncollected full value. And then obviously the AR, which is going to be the difference between the production and the collection. And this would be the number that you want to keep the closest to a zero as possible. On the top, you have extra filters and sorting options that you can utilize to get more of this report. So you can do daily, weekly, monthly, a range if you want to. Let's say I'm going to run a weekly report. So obviously that will include more procedures and more codes in here. You can filter by provider. So if you want to see only one provider, or you can group by provider, and that will show you all the providers on the system that have any collection or production, and it will group them for you, and it will show you a summary per one of those providers in there. If you do want to run only a collection report, so that way you only want to see the collections of every provider, which is again particularly useful if you just want to pay your associates based on the collections, then you can just click on collection only report, and this will remove the production value and only show you what has been collected over the range that you have selected in here. After the production and collection, you have the production per code. So under the production per code, you have the option to actually run your report and see how many times you've done a specific procedure. This is particularly useful if you want to see how many times you've done comp exams, how many times you've done, let's say, adjustments, let's say like crown adjustments or bite adjustments. If you have a lot of products that you sell in the office, then this would be a great way to actually be able to tell how many times you've done a procedure, you've rendered one. You can actually search for particular codes, and the nice thing about this is you can actually search for either a code specifically or actually the code itself. So let's say I'm gonna go for P240. So this is my carry-free, for example, and I want to go for, let's say, another carry-free product. Oops. So I can actually type in carry-free and it will give me all the carry-free products on my system. So let's say I have the 2380 as well, and I click on search. So it will filter out all my codes to specifically the procedures that I'm looking for. So that way you can see the total production, how much you've actually gotten as production out of those procedures, and how much it's actually contributed towards the total of this. So for example, if you're selling 3 different types of toothpaste and you want to see which one is a hit in the office, which one is patients are buying more often, then you can definitely see the percentages in here, which is really nice. It will tell you how much of those procedures selected you're actually selling most of. Same thing applies if you want during the there's the filters here, so you can filter by specific provider, so you can see, and you can group by provider, so you can see how many times, let's say, each and every provider did, let's say, a comp exam. If you want to see how many times each one of the hygienists sold a product, you can definitely do that from here, and this is a really flexible report that you can utilize for a lot of the analytics in the office. Actually, before I go on, I'm going to take just a 2-minute break just to catch up with your questions on the Q&A, and we'll get back to this in a second. All right, hello everyone. Let's continue from here. So I just read some of your questions on the QA. Okay, so moving in from the production per code, we're going to go into the adjustment report. The adjustment report is really very straightforward. It's just made for you to be able to track all the adjustments that are happening on the system. So I'm going to run again just a larger range so we can get a bit more basically data in here. So you can see, for example, that I can run again the report at for any range of time that you like. You can filter again by any provider. You can group by provider, or you can group even by adjustment type. So that way you can see in total how much adjustments you've applied over a specific range of time. So you can see how much courtesy adjustments you're doing versus professional, let's say, courtesy, and write-offs that are basically your contracted adjustments from the insurance. So that way you can see at the end of a specific date range how much you've applied in adjustments. You can see who's been applying them, which provider is getting those adjustments on their accounts. So that way you can actually print either each one of them separately, or you can print the entire report. So again, this is just to be able to track all the adjustments that are being applied on your system. Then you do have the credit account report. So the credit account report is, again, a very straightforward report that allows you to track any claim, any credit that is outstanding on the patient's system. So meaning that you can see a list of all your patients with their date of birth, their email, their phone number, and how much is actually available in credit on their accounts. We've had this request very frequently to actually add a filter for patients with outstanding balances, and that's something that's coming up actually very soon. So you'll be able to filter out patients that have outstanding balances or don't have outstanding balances. So you can actually decide whether or not you want to contact those patients and you want to reach out to them to maybe refund any credit that's on their system, or maybe apply it towards their outstanding balances if they decide to. So this is your credit account report, which is this one here. Then you have the deposit summary. I'm just going to jump to that one for a second. The deposit summary is very similar to the deposit slip. However, this allows you to run basically a deposit slip over multiple days. So I'm just going to show you this over again, just a month range, so you can see what that looks like. So instead of it just being a total value of how much you've gotten through, let's say, MasterCard or cash or check, it shows you per day how much collections you have. So for example, on the 5th of March, I have, let's say, in cash $250, in check I have 600, EFTs I have $1,800. So that way it gives you an overview or a summary of all the deposits that have been done over the range that you've selected, but per day instead of it being just lumped up just per payment type. So this is really good, again, for bookkeeping purposes. If you want to run your bank account statement and your deposit summary, so that way you can actually compare the two and make sure that they actually reconcile properly. The last financial report right now is under the modifications report. The modifications report is actually an audit trail for all the edits that have happened on the admin and the billing side. So for example, I'm going to go to, I think yesterday's would have a bit more information. So you can see, for example, here I have an action that is add, which type of transaction was added, what procedure, rendering provider, billing provider, the fees that have been affected, the patient name, and the user that actually applied those transactions. So you can see an add action in here. You can see a backdate from and a backdate to, for example. So these are all the different actions that were done on the patient's accounts that will affect your production or collection values. So this way you can actually track every single activity that was done per provider and per user on all the patient accounts. So the nice thing about this, it's not just an audit trail for your users, so it does not basically mess up the trail with just like random things like changes in the schedule or like on the patient profile. It is purely for the admin and purely for your billing side. So that way you can actually just track financially all the audits that have been done over the last, again, day or two, depending on the range that you're running. So we went over the financial reports. We have a lot more coming actually very soon. So these will be updated very soon. Under the patient reports, you have the patient by insurance coverage. So this is really nice to kind of analyze your patient pool to see which patients you have coming from which insurances. So you can group by payer if you want, and you can see, for example, how many patients you have under Primera, how much you have, for example, under Delta Dental. So for example, I have, let's say 12 patients under Delta Dental of Illinois versus, for example, I have a MetLife, I have 37 patients in there. So you can actually track how many patients you have coming from each one of the carriers. You can actually filter as well by past appointment dates. So for example, if you want to see in the last month which carrier, for example, was the most common one in your practice, you can actually do that from here. Or you can even group by plan or basically by employer. So you can see if you have a specific employer that you have a lot of their employees coming in, for example, so you can actually group by plan in here. You can search for a specific as well carrier or plan. So you can actually do a complete search in here. And that again, and it allows you just simply take a look at your insurance pool. You can see if it makes sense for you to be in contract with a particular carrier. So if you have enough patients that are actually subscribed to that insurance company or not, this is really good to actually run every once in a while. And as well for offices that are considering having membership plans, then if you click on show patients with no insurance coverage, it will allow you to show, it will allow you to see the patients that don't have any insurances. So that way you can tell how many patients, let's say on your system. In my case, I have 350 patients that don't have any insurances on the system. So you can actually decide whether or not it's a good idea to have a membership plan in the office for your patients. After the insurance coverage, you do have the referral report. So the referral report is going to be, it's going to show you all the different patients that have been added into the system and their source of referral. So all the sources that you see on the right side here are fully customizable from your admin side. So you can add more or remove some if you don't actually use. So you have the promotional offers if you're running any, for example, Google search, magazines, newspapers, so you can actually change those. And then it will show you how many patients have come from every one of those sources. You can click on either the pie chart section itself or on the ledger here. And if you click on it, it will give you a list of all the patients that actually have come from that specific referral source. And you have a shortcut to their profile, to their schedule, to their billing page and treatment plan page. So that way, if you want to actually jump to, let's say, their treatment and maybe put a note or maybe go into the billing and add I don't know, a discount, that really gives you a very nice just shortcut to all these patients from here. So we went over those two patient reports, and then the last report is the clinical report, the ReCare, and that's something that we'll be covering through the ReCare flow. So I'm not going to go over this for now. I'm going to go into actually the dashboard. So under the, again, we went through the claim management, insurance, patch payments, reports, and now it's the dashboard here. So the dashboard is going to be an overview of your practice. So I'm going to again run it just over a month, just so that we have a bit more data to look at together. Again, keep in mind, please, that the numbers that you're going to see might not make a lot of sense because, again, this is a testing account, so people have been playing around and adding some insurances, basically, and some payments here and there. So you can see here your total value. So, okay, so I think we have some connection problem. We're good? Can you hear me fine? All right, perfect. Okay, so the dashboard is going to show you an overview of your practice. So you'll see it either on today, this week, this month, this year, or you can add a range if you have a specific range in mind that you want to see the numbers over. So you have the first row would be your production and collection. So you can see the total production of the specific range that you're on, the collection of it as well. So I'm going to actually run just a report starting from March so that we can see some production value in here. All right, so you can see that I have, for example, $23,000 in production, for example. The scheduled value is 24. So the schedule is basically, scheduled value is technically the potential of the office. So it will show you how much is on the schedule versus how much is already produced. Obviously, if you're running a report that will include future days, keep in mind that obviously the scheduled will be much higher than the production because you do have days that you haven't obviously still walked out. But if you are looking at past range of dates, then your production, your scheduled value and the production value should be very close. If you do have a difference between the two values, it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for and figuring out why is there a difference between the production value and the scheduled value. If you do have a lot of scheduled value that is higher than the production, then you're probably overscheduling the providers, meaning that there's a lot more procedures attached to appointments that the providers basically never walked out or were never done by the clinical team. If you see the production value being much higher than what's scheduled, then that means that your appointments don't have all the procedures that were actually done on that day. And that means that either you're under scheduling the procedures or basically you're forgetting to attach a lot of those procedures to the appointments that are happening. So These two numbers should ideally be very similar when it comes to past dates. And again, obviously, when you're looking at future dates, then your scheduled value is definitely going to be much higher, and it will show you how far away you are from reaching your goal, which is this vertical black line here. And those goals can be preset, obviously, from your admin side by setting your number of working hours, the providers, how much each provider is supposed to be producing per hour, and so on and so forth. The collection is limited to whatever is actually applied as payments. So every time you apply payment on the system, it will actually increase your collection value in here. Again, keeping in mind that any prepayments that are done are not considered to be collections. They are considered to be credit on the patient's balance. So meaning that this collection value is actually the accurate collection based on the procedures that are actually rendered during that phase. Then you do have the production per hour. So it just shows you on average how much you've actually produced per hour, which is a great number to look at for as a trend. And then production per visit as well. It will show you the total productions divided by the numbers of visits that you've done during that phase. So that way, again, you have an average that you can look at and again, just see the trend and see how it changes over time. Those numbers are then subdivided into dentists and hygienists. So you can see production that is assigned to the dentist of the office, and the production and collections are assigned towards the hygienist. So you can see how much each one of the two groups or two teams are doing. Then each one of those bar graphs are split into that second row that you see at the bottom here. So you can see how much total production is out of the goal, how much is out of this production, how much of it is treatment versus how much of it is hygiene. So you can set as well goals for those. So if you want to do, let's say 60% of your production needs to be treatment and 40%, let's say, to be hygiene, you can actually preset those from the admin. And then your treatment production is subdivided into categories that you can as well customize. So you can say, I want my direct restorations to be 30%, my direct restorations to be, let's say, 50%. So you can actually customize where your production needs to be coming from and actually track that production real time as you walk out procedures. Same thing applies to the hygiene production. So you can actually preset, how much you would like the production to be coming from, let's say, prophy versus perio maintenance versus SRPs. So you can actually track this very closely and see where the production is coming from and where you would like to increase maybe a bit more production instead of actually maybe doing a lot of prophies, and you'd like to focus more on perio maintenance. And that would be a great place as well to track this from. The next would be the attendance rate. And again, keeping in mind, again, those numbers are not going to make a lot of sense because of the testing, again, because of all the people that are just adding random appointments here and there. But you do have the attendance rate, which is how many patients came up versus out of how many actually were scheduled. So you have 26 out of 55 actually came into the practice, meaning that their status, the appointment status, changed from confirmed or or unconfirmed to either seated, arrived, checked out. It doesn't matter. Anything that is after the confirmation is considered to be an attendance. If you do manually, obviously, go in and cancel an appointment or mark it as a no-show, then the system will count those as basically cancellations or no-shows. So basically, these would be your broken appointments in here. The two rows that you see underneath are the reappointment rate. So you can see how many patients got reappointed. So out of 54 patients, 13 got their treatment appointment for the future. And out of 26 hygiene patients, 11 of them got reappointed for their next basically recare appointment. So these are very good numbers to look at. Again, these are your new patients. So you want to see how many of your new patients got their future appointments. Your treatment patients, basically how many patients came to your office for their treatment and got rescheduled for the next visit and for their next hygiene. And obviously your hygiene patients and how many of them have already a treatment appointment for the future and hygiene appointment for the future as well. Last would be the fourth row in here, which will show you all the three pie charts that we've seen throughout the previous webinars. So you will see the patient acceptance gates. So you can see here how much is already scheduled, accepted and scheduled, how much is in progress, and how much you have still not scheduled. So this is a list that you definitely have as potential that you'd want to reach out to. So you'd want to just click on this pie chart, and it will generate a list of all the patients that fall under this category with their date of birth, their phone number, the last communication. So you can say, when was the last time you actually reached out to this patient? So for example, I'm going to say that I reached out today. I can say that patient needs to check maybe with insurance. Let's see, is it working? Is it working fine, guys? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? No, nothing at all? Yep. All right, we're good. All right. So as I was saying, so you do have that list that you can generate, and the last communication date can be changed from here. So you can say, for example, I reached out today to my patient. The patient said that they need to check with their insurance and they would like to be contacted again, for example, and they'd like to be followed up maybe in a week from now. So that way you can actually set those up, and obviously you can see how much is outstanding in their insurance. I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again. Sorry, guys. Just to make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing. All right, it looks like the screens are frozen. Hello, everyone. I can see that you guys are having some technical issues with seeing my screen, I think. And I think it's a problem from Zoom. I'm just going to answer some of the questions that are coming through on the Q&A until hopefully we're back to the screen sharing. So someone just asked us if the patients that are marked as no-shows count towards both new patients and hygiene, or only one of them. So as long as the patient is marked as a new patient, which is for their first appointment in the office, they are only counted in under the new patient list. Once the patient is checked out or walked out the first time out of the office, then they stop being counted as a new patient, and then from there on, they will start being counted either as a treatment or a hygiene patient, depending on the appointment type that's basically assigned to their appointment in the schedule. Um, we don't want to double count no-shows and cancellations. Is the dashboard set up to double count them? No, again, no, we don't double count the patients. The idea is that, again, as long as the patient is marked as a new patient, then they won't be counted into either the hygiene nor the treatment visits. Let me see, what else can we do? Okay. Can we break out canceled appointments to the patient canceled or the office canceled? Right now, they're all under canceled, but definitely you can keep a note in the appointment card, and we will look into seeing if there is any way to differentiate between those two for sure. I'm going to try to reshare my screen with you, and hopefully that will work with Zoom. All right, perfect. We're back online. All right. So as I was saying earlier, so again, I'm just going to go back to this. So we were talking about those pie charts at the bottom here, and you have the new patient acceptance, then you have the existing patient acceptance, and then you have the hygiene intervals. So you can see at the legend at the bottom here, or you can obviously click on or hover over any of those sections on the pie chart itself. It will show you how much is in potential in every single one of those categories. And definitely the accepted not scheduled is a list that you want to keep a close eye on, because this is a list of procedures that have been accepted and the patient does not have a single treatment appointment coming up in the future. So if you click on this list, it will show you a list of all the patients that are part of this category. You can see their age, their phone number, the date, basically the last time they were in the office, the last time you've communicated with the patient. You can actually come in here and click, let's say, on today's date. You can add a note and say, for example, patient, for example, checking with, let's say, parents. And then you can say, would the patient would like to be contacted again, yes or no? So you can say yes, for example, and add a date and say patient is going to want, I don't know, someone to call him back on Monday. So you can set that up in here. You have the email address and you have the value of the actual treatment that is outstanding per patient. You can actually shuffle this or sort this list by follow-up date. So if you click on this, it will allow you to actually change the list based on the age or the date that is the follow-up date. So that way you can actually start with the patients that have requested a follow-up. And the same thing applies to your recare list. So I'll go through that again in a second. And you do have as well all those small shortcuts on the side that allow you to jump into the schedule, into the billing page or the treatment page if you want to see or add any notes, or you want to see any previous visits. You can definitely do that from here. On the hygiene interval here, you can see you have the patients that are on time, that are not pre-appointed, meaning that these are patients that are not yet late to the office, but don't have actually an appointment coming up soon. So these are patients that are potential to be late. So that means that this is a list that you do want to keep to a minimum. Then you have patients that are on time and are pre-appointed. That is the perfect group of people that you have on the schedule, so you don't have to worry about them at all. You have the no recare patients. So these are patients that don't have any prophy or cleaning ever done in the office, so meaning that they don't have a due date coming up. So the system considers them as not a recare patient. Then you do have the late more than a year and then late less than a year. So some offices over a year, they maybe follow up with them less frequently than patients that are late less than a year. Then you can actually break it down into patients that are late, but they are already appointed. So this is a list of patients that you've actually managed to catch and you've actually added them to the schedule. So this is someone that you don't need to reach out to. Then you do have the broken appointments, meaning that they did have an appointment on the schedule, they either canceled it or they didn't show up to it. So that means that this is a list of patients that have basically left the office with an appointment associated with their due date, but they basically never showed up to it. And then the last list is the no appointment list, which is a list of all your patients that have left the office without taking any appointment for their next hygiene. And this is really nice to track, just to be able to tell what is the reason behind the patient's lateness. Is it a mistake from the patient's side, or the office needs to make sure that more patients are leaving the practice with their future hygiene appointment already on the schedule. So again, same thing like the acceptance. If you click on any of those categories, it will give you a list of the patients with shortcuts, their age, contact, the recall date, when was the last time basically they came for a recall, when was the last time they did an exam, regardless of what kind of exam, if it was a comp exam or a periodic evaluation, they will show up in here. Again, last communication, their notes, would they like to be contacted again, the follow-ups, if there are any appointments coming up in the future, and as well you do have the contact count. So every time you change the communication date, it will count it as a contact. So that means that you'll see, for example, if you've contacted the patient, let's say 3-4 times versus someone who's never been contacted, then you can tell who would be worth reaching out to first. One of the really nice things about this report, and this is something that a lot of people actually miss, is actually the fact that you can actually leave the page that you're on and still be able to access this. So I'm going to show you this. Actually, it's either on this list, or even if you're on the reports page and you go into the clinical reports and then you go into the recare report here, which is again under the months today, is the exact same pie chart that we saw in the dashboard. So if you actually click on any of those charts, and for example, I'm going to go into Holly's treatment plan. If I click on the treatment plan button here, it will actually take me to the patient's treatment plan page. But if you actually notice on the very far right side here, under my camera icon, I do have a new button that showed up that says Recare, which if you click on, will actually give me the list of the same list that I was on right like before navigating to the patient's treatment plan. So that way, if you want to just quickly jump from one treatment plan to another without having to worry about losing on the list that you're on, especially if you are on, let's say, the 5th or 6th page, for example, you don't want to lose where you're at. So you can just simply click that treatment plan button again, and it will take you to the patient that you're on, again, keeping the list in here so that way you can actually review it and continue from where you left off. So this will basically bring us to the end of the dashboard. I'm going to take a 2-minute break just to see if we have any new questions coming in, and we'll do a last round of Q&A before we end this. All right. So a very common question that has come in is to actually have a full checkout flow to show how an appointment basically is checked out from start to end, including insurances and payments and so on. So I'm going to do a full checkout flow in a bit. And I think a very common question that came in as well was regarding the finance charges. So I'll cover those as well as we go through the patient flow. Regarding the settings and the customization per account on how to set the referral sources, the dashboard goals, and so on and so forth, there will be a training in the coming couple of weeks that is specifically just focused on setting up the accounts and going through all the admin sections one page at a time. So that will definitely be something that we'll go over, but we are running out of time, so we're not going to have enough time to cover the admin side of this. So I'm going to show you the checkout flow, and any questions that you do have, just keep them coming through the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer as many as we can with the time left. So I'm going to use one of a new patient completely. So again, I'm just going to do a flow. So a patient calls in and they want a new appointment. So I'm just going to call her, I don't know, Lily, I don't know, Frost. So date of birth, if you get it, you can add it in here. Oops. Phone number, email address, send welcome email, and then new patient. So create new patient in here. You want to give the patient an appointment for today, for example. I'm just going to do it just for training purposes. And I'm going to say that she's coming in for a new patient procedures. So I'm adding those procedures into her appointment card, which obviously by default add into the treatment plan as well. So you don't have to worry about those. And then you just hit that add button. So once the patient comes into the office, you would obviously change this to arrived, and the back team would actually come in and take the patient back into the operatory and change this to seated. So once the patient is seated, obviously the procedures are happening. They go through the treatment planning, they go through the exam. So that's something that's done on the clinical side. And once the clinical team is done with the patient and they're about to walk them out, they would actually come back to the schedule and they would double click on the appointment. So they can either do it from the schedule itself here from the card. They can either double click on the actual card that you see on the left hand as well. So you double click, it opens the same exact window. Or they can actually come into the checkout checklist and click on complete and bill procedures. And they do have access as well to the procedures that are attached to that appointment. So you can do it by any of the three options. Again, it's just a matter of giving you the flexibility of choosing the easiest way for your team. So you just decide on what makes it what's easier and where you usually find yourself clicking on just basically naturally, and just go ahead with it. Now you see the list here. So if, for example, you didn't do 4 bite wings, you did 2 bite wings, you can actually change it from the drop down here and say, for example, I don't know where this is the 3. This is my 2 bite wings in here. And then, for example, the pano can stay in here. For example, if the hygienist came up to you and said, for example, we had some time to do a fluoride, which was not actually added into the patient's appointment, you can always click on add procedure and come in here and say, for example, fluoride. And for example, it was, I don't know, topical, varnish, click save, and it will add that procedure into the card, and it will automatically add as a completed procedure for you. Otherwise, you can actually click complete all if you did everything. If you didn't do, for example, the pano, then you can click on comp exam and you can do the bite wings, and you can leave the pano not checked. And something that a lot of people actually are doing, just I think naturally, just they click on complete all at the end. Again, if you click on complete all, it will actually complete the entire list. So don't click on this if you don't mean to complete the entire list of procedures that are on that appointment. So once the back team does this, so you can actually just mark what you've actually walked out. You just click on done, and you change the appointment status to checkout incomplete. So that way, automatically on the screens of the front desk, this will flip to gray. So that way, they know that this is a patient that's about to be walked out, and their appointments, their procedures have been already completed and posted. So you don't have to wait for anything. So the front can actually take that moment to just either, again, double click on the appointment or click on checkout, complete and bill procedures. You can see the list in here. Again, you can just double check and make sure that the procedures are correct. And then when you click on collect payment, it will take you straight into the billing page of the patient, and it will show you the procedures that were completed and basically walked out from the back. So that way you don't have to worry about doing any you don't have to click on add procedure at any point. Again, the add procedure is there just in case there was a procedure that was not meant to be basically, sorry, that was meant to be walked out but was not added, so the clinical team forgot to add it into the treatment plan. Then you can definitely add it in here. So for example, I don't know, they did sedation, they did an extra PA that they forgot to walk out, then you can definitely click the add procedure from here. Otherwise, if there was nothing forgotten and everything was walked out from the clinical team correctly, then this list is going to be the full list. You can just, again, visually confirm that the provider is correct, the procedures are there, and you just click on add invoice. So now you have an outstanding balance with this amount of $61. For example, there's 31 for the bite wings, 30 for the comp exam. These are my fees coming from the fee guide. You can see that there's an insurance zero balance because this patient does not have an insurance yet. And you can double check by just simply clicking on that insurance coverage here. So I'm going to just quickly go into the insurance and add a coverage for this patient. So I'm going to go ahead and say Delta Dental. Company say of Utah, and let's say this patient is actually coming from, let's say, whatever. Let's say their insurance number, again, oops. I'm just gonna call it Oryx, and my employer is Oryx Inc. Let's say my maximum is $2,000. And if I am in network, I can select it. I'm going to say I'm not contracted with this insurance. So I'm going to go ahead and just go and save this. Patient ID, whatever is on the insurance card, again, just save policy. And if I go into the billing, you will see automatically the system estimated that insurance coverage as 100% on the insurance balance. So the patient basically owes nothing at this point, based again on the insurance coverage, because those are diagnostic procedures that are covered at 100%. One of a very common question that came in as well, how would the non-assignment invoice look like? So I'm just going to show you. If I click on here and say non-assignment, and I can actually go into the finance billing at this point. And this is where the re-estimate is just going to come in handy, just so I can show you how this is going to change. Right now, I think my insurance is actually set to in-network, so it's not going to flip this over, except if I go in and actually, let me see which provider. So it's Ronald. I'm going to actually change this so I can show you what that looks like, just for training purposes. So this is Delta, and I'm going to say that Dr. Ronald is actually out of network. And again, just re-estimate my invoice. It's not going to work. Okay. All right, it's not going to work with me today. Okay. Let me just double check that this is non-assignment. It's not assignment. Great. Okay. Okay. So basically the insurance will actually flip over to the patient's balance, and the patient will actually be responsible for the entire amount in that case. So if you do need to ever change anything from here, you can do it under the edit as well, just in case you ever want to switch over portions. But basically in here, if a patient pays you any part of it, so a lot of people ask the patient to, let's say, pay 10% or 20% of the invoice, because they are estimating that there's a possibility the insurance not going to pay what they're expecting. You can always come in here, change the payment value, and let's say pay, let's say $10 in here. And you don't have to actually have an owing, so don't worry, you don't have to actually change anything. Once you apply that $10, the system will automatically just transfer an owing from the insurance towards the patient. So that way there's going to be a patient payment in here. Then you can click on manual claim. You can select which procedures are going to go out, send to batch. And again, if you are a Canadian realm, then there'll be a button here that says submit, and you can submit it straight from here. And the Canadians will actually just submit it real time and get a response on the spot. Versus again, if you are a US realm, then or office, you'll get it under the claim management tab, and that's where you would send it out. In both cases, if you do have a validation error, you can click on this. It will tell you what's missing. In my case, I did not add an address for this patient. So if you go into the patient details, for example, in here, click edit. I'm gonna go for United States. And if I go back to billing, it will automatically revalidate my claim and it would be ready for submission. So in both cases, for both the Canadian and American realms, if there was a problem with the submission, you'll be able to see them both under the claim management page and you can submit them from there. So any claim that had a validation error, you will be able to resubmit it from the claim management page once you correct the validation errors in there. Then there's the insurance payment that comes in at any point. So let's say after 2 weeks or something, insurance sends you an invoice, or sorry, a check. You can actually select it from here, say check, whatever the insurance check number is. Partial payment is only used in the case you're actually expecting another payment from the same exact insurance policy. If you have a secondary insurance, you don't have to click that partial payment at all. It will automatically allow you to add a second insurance. So the partial payment is only used in case you're expecting a second payment from the same exact insurance policy. So either you're actually going to send them another claim with more information. If you're expecting the insurance, if it's a large payment and you're expecting it in installments, then you can click on partial payment. So that way the system knows that this claim is not going to be closed and still it's expecting to get more payments applied towards the same claim. So if you need to change any of those values, you can do it from here. So you can say, for example, the insurance, let's say, underpaid me $20. They only paid $20 for my bite wings. So that $11 that are underpaid by the insurance, again, based on what the system estimated, will automatically apply towards the patient balance. So if you click apply, then you have an outstanding balance of $11 in here. And you can either share the statement electronically through MyChart if the patient has a MyChart account. You can print out the statement if you want to. And if the patient does have any credits on the system, so if the patient had any prepayments or they overpaid at any point, then you can definitely do a patient payment. And you would click on from account credit. And then based on what you have in the account credit, it will allow you to apply that payment towards the patient's balance. Last thing, just regarding the finance charge. So you can see under the finance charge, there's a few options. So the NSF, the broken appointment, and the late cancellation are flat rates, meaning that you can preset how much each one of them is. So you can say, for example, late cancellations are an extra $40 charge. Late payments are actually a percentage out of how much is outstanding. So for example, if the patient didn't pay those $11 for over 90 days, I can click on late payment and I can check, for example, that I want to calculate the payment value. So in the settings, you can say I want, let's say 30 days late payment is 10% of the payment of the outstanding balance. Let's say 60 days, it's 20%, and then maybe 90 days is 30% of that balance. So based on the invoices that you select, the system will automatically calculate how much that finance charge is going to be. So you can click on add late fee and it will calculate based on those $11 how much that late payment will be, which will be 1.6 based on the percentages that I have set up in my admin. So that way it's a late payment value, and that way once the patient actually comes in to pay for their outstanding balance, they actually owe $11 for their previous invoice and the 1.65 because of that late payment charge that you've added, which you can see at the very top here in the aging report, which is $12.65 as a total outstanding. So that will cover everything that we went through over the Q&A session. And definitely stay tuned for the trainings that are coming up next week and the week after. We have a lot of things lined up when it comes to advanced trainings with ReCare, with admin settings, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of things coming. And definitely sign up for tomorrow's webinar with Dr. Jeremy Peterson. He has a great lecture set up for you. He'll go over his own flow in the office, the clinical exam, and it'll be a really nice lecture to definitely watch, and you'll have the chance to ask some questions as well. We have Dr. Kois lined up as well very soon. Hopefully we'll be announcing that the coming few days, so stay tuned. You'll be getting newsletters, you'll be seeing it on our social media, so definitely keep an eye out for those announcements. And if you we will be sending the recordings of all the sessions. We've already sent the recording of last week's sessions in your previous newsletter, and we'll be sending the recording of this session as well as soon as they're done processing. So have a great day. Thank you all for attending. Hope this was beneficial for everyone, and we'll be talking to you soon.